let's talk about kind of like self-discipline and having a positive mentality. And that kind of ties in also with talking about mental health and how you manage this yourself. And what kind of comments do you have on that, and what's your experience been?
So is that how I approach my mental health and how I look after it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
really important actually. I think it's a really important one that so many of us can overlook time to time. An analogy that I speak about is that, again, we spoke about fitness in the beginning, and we're all quite comfortable talking about that. Like, we know we've got to look after our bodies, exercise, move it. If we don't stretch it, we could get injuries. If we don't move it enough, we're at risk of metabolic syndrome and obesity and these kind of things. And if we eat the wrong foods and drink too much alcohol, we get fatty liver disease. So I think all of these things we're very aware of, and we talk about it quite openly, and we try to make active choices to help that. When it comes to our brain's an organ, but we tend to shy away from exercising that organ, and there's a lot of stigma still attached to it. And it's really important that, our brain is an organ and we do need to look after it. So as much as we're looking after our bodies by going to the gym and eating well and trying to not drink too much alcohol, maybe not smoke, we seem to just kind of digress from the brain side of things because there's too much stigma there. But actually, if we can look after our mental health through doing self-care, through going to therapy, through building communities and close-knit support groups of friends that we can rely on to call when we're having a hard time and talk about our problems, that actually is fantastic to helping prevent and look after your mental health. So for me, things that are really important is, again, making sure I check in on my movements every day. If I've not exercised, have I gone on a walk? Have I got some light, like some Lux, to help me sleep? Sleep is really important for my mental health. One thing I used to really overlook was my sleep and just think I'd get up at 6 and start a workout, or log straight onto my emails and have a really productive first hour of my morning before everyone wakes up. But now I realise probably not the best thing for my mental health throughout the day. So I really try to prioritise sleep. I really try to eat nutritionally. I do always go for walks. And for me, I really do try to make sure I have enough social interaction time, because I think so many times we can be in our phones, be on Instagram, work really hard and forget about a really big part of our life that actually is really important to help our mental health flourish. So I do try to inject some really important time throughout my week and weekends of spending time with people that I love socially as well. So I think we can overlook that side quite heavily, but that's really important for me. And then, I meditate as well. That's really important. Just to kind of give yourself 5 minutes throughout the day just to calm and reset your mind. And the word meditation, I think, can really scare people, because I think, it scared me, I guess. I used to think I had to sit there with my legs crossed and not think about anything like a Buddha. And I'd be like, I'm doing this all wrong, and there'd be a lot of shame attached to it. And now sometimes I even have a walking meditation. Like sometimes if I'm just walking, I'll actually put on a walking meditation. There isn't like one way to meditate. It's about how it works for you. And for me, I'm an active person. So if I'm stressed and I need to go on a walk, but I want to switch my mind off, I will put on a walking meditation. That's kind of how I try to optimize and look after my mental health.
Yeah, again, I think, it can be very individual. And I think also that it's interesting about what you mentioned with the social interactions and how important that is, with people who had been isolated through what we've been through, and people really realise that they needed it, and it's even more important. And humans are social creatures, so...
Well, I think we all saw that. I think the big rise in mental health conversation started really in COVID, because everyone was suffering with mental health. And there's a thing, isn't it, that you're scared to talk about it because you think that you're going to be labelled with this disease of mental health. But we all have a brain, so we all have mental health. Doesn't mean that you have a mental health condition, but we all suffer time to time with high amounts of stress and loneliness and isolation. And that's really what COVID brought to the forefront, was that we all suffered. And, I definitely struggled. I was on my own. I lived on my own. And I think that isolation is something we're not meant to be going through as human individuals. Social interaction is so important. So now I really, really do try to make sure I invest heavily into that side.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's interesting you said, everybody has mental health of some degree, and it's different experiences. Some people have kind of anxiety, some people overthink things, and some people maybe almost like more hyperactive, and it's different ways. And obviously some people feel low. So it's interesting how everyone's experience is different. But it's just as you're trying to balance your exercise and look after your body, you have to look after, your mental well-being.
Our brain, for sure. And we have to talk about it. We have to be not afraid to reach out when you're just feeling a bit low and a bit rubbish. And I think anyone also that does reach out to you, you don't have to be a therapist and give a solution. It's just listening. And I think especially for those who are overthinkers, just so it's not heavily in their mind and they're allowing that to be shared is really, really important.
Exactly. And I think as well, like, everybody faces challenges within life. Like, life can bring those challenges and mountains to climb and forks in the road. So, those things will obviously affect anybody. And but it's kind of like how we can support each other on the journey.
Definitely. And, it's one of those things, isn't it? Life is a complete unexpected journey, and through those really hard times comes through so much growth of somebody and as an individual. But it's so important to lean on your support system through that time.
Can you think of any kind of like personal struggles or kind of professional struggles that you had that you've really kind of managed to overcome that stick in your mind as a time?
I mean, hundreds. I mean, we could do a whole podcast.
We'll do a
this.
second episode.
There's definitely not one or two. I'm kind of like, there's a lot. And anyone close to me in my life would agree that I've definitely not had an easy ride. As anyone has, actually. No one's had an easy ride. I don't know if anyone's had an easy journey in their life. But I mean, mine was I've had a lot. I've had a lot of questionings about if I'm doing the right thing. I started off modelling at a really young age, a really influential age. And, I was living in New York by the time I was 19 and promised the world and actually did exceptionally well in my career. But my God, I was lonely. But nobody spoke about loneliness back then. I didn't even know really what mental health was. I hadn't ever heard the word anxiety or anything like that. And looking at a young adult flying around the world on their own, staying in a different hotel room every night, maybe not even get to stay in a hotel room because the overnight flight would be your bed. Every time trying to make a plan with your friends or family being cancelled because you were back to back with work, and kind of just feeling like you're living this life on your own without any support group because every day you would be with a different set of people. Quite hard to navigate when you're quite young.
Yeah.
As well as every day worried about an imperfection that's going to come up, or if you're on your period and you're going to be bloated or feeling awful and then someone's going to point that out on set in front of 50 people, your self-esteem is pretty rocketed at that point. But you're also meant to, you are very grateful of being given this amazing opportunity. So you don't talk about it, you just kind of deal with it. And then, that just grows as anxiety within you. So for sure. And then I think, I started realising how important nutrition was and how I might not be optimizing my own nutrition because I was so, aware of my work and things like that. And then wanting to go and study it and understand more about it. But, there was a real pivotal point where everyone in my life was like, you are crazy. Why would you ever go and study nutrition? Because when I was studying it, also, it wasn't a buzzword. Nobody spoke about nutrition. Science was not cool. You also started on, looking at the NHS on your earnings of like 18,000 a year. And you're going from a high performing career flying around the world to I'm going to go and study for £10,000+ a year and then go into a job that probably won't pay off my loan. And everyone just thinking, why would you do that? And so there was, no need for nutritionists back then. Nobody spoke about it, but it was something that was really important and passionate for me. So there was definitely times in my life when I questioned myself. I thought I was doing the wrong thing. And there's that awful thing when you're not sure if you're making the right decision or not. And that fear can ultimately stop so many people to actually following their passions, even if it's not the most lucrative direction. And so I've definitely had times in my life where I've like, you know, second guessed myself or given myself a really hard time or thought I'd failed and had people told me that I'd failed by making the wrong choice. And I think you've just got to really try and stay intuitive to what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think throughout my 20s, I mean, it was an absolute disaster in so many places, a complete disaster. But through that, you know, I really tried to question myself and find what my purpose was. And I think I'm still going to always be on that journey. But I think more of the forefront about what's important to me has kind of, I've nourished and I've tried to take on board, but it's not been easy.
No.
It's definitely not been easy. Through doing that, there's definitely been times when I've struggled financially through that, or worried about if I've chucked a career away and if people are going to think I'm crazy and if I'm intelligent enough to do something like that, because you get told as a model you're meant to be thick and just look pretty and, you know, then going to do biochemistry, you know, there's this whole kind of like, is she meant to be doing that and being judged? And, you know, a lot of stereotypes kind of come to the forefront and, you know, you just got to really have belief in yourself. And I think, you know, that's something that I've struggled with in my 20s, but feel that I'm kind of starting to get there now. So there's a lot of, kind of a lot of interesting stories.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, you know, we can be very self-critical, but it's interesting how by following your passion, you've come to that place. And it often seems to be that if you do follow something that you're really passionate about, things can have a way of working themselves out
Completely
afterwards.
And, you know, there's so much fear in changing directions, changing your job, changing where you're living, whatever it is. There's so much uncertainty that comes with change. But through the uncertainty, you grow and you do find a direction. I think something that I've had to definitely come to terms with, being quite a perfectionist and just how I am myself, is that you will never know what's around the corner. So you can't predict the next 5 years of your life. You can't predict.
You can't plan everything.
You can't. And if you kind of think, well, if I'm going to change, am I going to be successful, or will I understand what I'm doing, or will I want to venture more into this career? You just have to go for it and just go, do you know what? If it doesn't work, I've tried. But the worst thing I actually never want to do is have a regret and think I should have done something. And it can be so much easier said than done because we're all in different situations, which allows us to do these things. But I would say, you know, always, if you can, just don't fear. Just try to go through it, especially for overthinkers. We'll always try and talk ourselves out of making a change or you know, doing something within our lives that could give us ultimately real happiness. So yeah, trying not to overthink is a big learning life lesson I've definitely come through.